Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad you all made it, despite the weather out there. It's wonderful to see such a packed audience for such an important event. Good evening to you, and welcome to the Hinton Lectures. My name is Farah Nasser, and I am so thrilled to be your host for this extraordinary three-night event. Now, we'd like to begin by acknowledging that the sacred land upon which this building operates is situated on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. And for those of you who are joining us here in person or online, we invite you to take a moment right now to just pause and reflect on the history of our land, where you live and where you work, and the peoples who have cared for this land for generations. Thank you. So let's get to it. Over the next 3 nights, we are going to explore some of the biggest and most pressing questions out there. What's next for artificial intelligence? How do we keep it safe? How should it be used, and who's going to decide that? See, AI is not a topic for scientists and engineers sitting in a lab anymore. It's shaping our world, from healthcare to transportation, to education, to entertainment, and I don't know about you, it feels like the world is just shifting beneath our feet. It's happening so very fast. The speed of change is remarkable, but it's also risky. And it's the type of risk that could affect our very existence. That's why when we talk about AI safety here today, it isn't a conversation just for those experts. It's a conversation for all of us. We need everyone, experts and the public alike, to ask questions, to share concerns, to propose solutions, to help set the standards for how and when AI should be used in our lives. And that's why we are so thrilled to welcome Owain Evans as our lecturer this week. He's doing some really groundbreaking work and research on alignment and the pressing risks of advanced AI systems. Owain is going to be introduced shortly by Professor Geoffrey Hinton. And speaking of Professor Hinton, he's the person that we have to thank for all of this. His vision and leadership have made these lectures possible. Now, before we dive in, we wanted to give a huge thank you to our founding and presenting sponsor, the Global Risk Institute, for their early and their unwavering support. And to help us open tonight's program, we're delighted to welcome GRI's President and CEO, Sonia Baxendale. Sonia is a highly respected executive. She brings more than 2 decades of leadership experience to the financial services industry. As president and CEO of the Global Risk Institute, she leads Canada's premier organization for risk management through leadership, bringing together leaders from industry, academia, government to address emerging risks and build resilience in this fast-changing world we live in. Before joining GRI, Sonia was the president of CIBC Retail Markets, guiding the bank's retail and wealth management business and shaping its long-term strategy. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Sonia Baxendale.
Thank you, Farah, for that kind introduction. And good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Global Risk Institute, I'm delighted to be sponsoring this year's lectures. It's gratifying to see such strong participation again this year, both here in this room and from viewers around the world joining virtually for these critical conversations about artificial intelligence. Founded in 2011 as a nonprofit public-private partnership, GRI is focused on risk management in the financial sector, with more than 50 members from government and industry. Through its core programming, research, education, and member engagement, we advance integrated risk management practices across the sector. The most Significant risks facing us today are happening at the intersection of a profound geopolitical shift and rapid technological disruption, with AI at its epicenter. Artificial intelligence is not only a source of disruption and risk and an amplifier of geopolitical disruption, it's also a driver of innovation and competitiveness that must be managed thoughtfully to ensure long-term economic and social benefit. This is the reason GRI launched the Hinton Lecture Series last year in partnership with Professor Geoffrey Hinton. This vision and partnership resulted in the formation of the AI Safety Foundation, which continues the development of a program focused on broad-based awareness and education. We're pleased to continue this year as a founding sponsor of this series and presenting sponsor of tonight's lecture. Over the next 3 nights, as Farah mentioned, you will hear from Owain Evans, winner of this year's Hinton Lecture Award, as well as panel speakers, as they examine AI from multiple vantage points, from technical safety and governance to the societal and ethical dimensions that affect each and every one of us. These lectures have become an important opportunity for engagement, sparking dialogue, and deepening all of our understanding of AI risks and opportunities. Professor Hinton, who you'll hear from momentarily, has demonstrated his willingness to challenge his industry's unbridled optimism, which makes him a rare and essential voice in shaping the future of AI. Through his leadership, the Hinton Lectures embody the essence of risk management itself, recognizing potential threats and innovation, weighing the long-term consequences against short-term gains, and fostering the disciplined foresight needed to guide transformative technologies towards safe and sustainable outcomes. GRI is honored to continue building on the vision for these lectures, fostering informed conversations, courageous conversations about the technology shaping our shared future. We are proud to partner with Professor Hinton and our fellow sponsors, Manulife and the AI Safety Foundation. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy the program.
Okay, it's now my distinct pleasure to introduce someone who needs very little introduction, a true architect of the intelligence age. We're, of course, speaking about Nobel laureate Professor Geoffrey Hinton. As one of the core visionaries behind deep learning, his work didn't just contribute to artificial intelligence, it fundamentally reshaped our world. The entire AI revolution that we're navigating right now can be traced back to his groundbreaking research, which paved the way for countless innovations. Today, he brings that same profound wisdom and foresight to arguably the biggest challenge of our time, ensuring the safety of these powerful systems. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving the warmest possible welcome to Professor Geoffrey Hinton.
So if you're like me, you're probably wondering, how many more speakers before we actually get to the content? The point of the lectures, the Hinton Lectures, is to educate the public so that they understand the risks and can put pressure on politicians to do something about the risks. Our speaker today is Owain Evans, who was the first choice of most of the committee, the selection committee. We were lucky to get him. He did his Ph.D. at MIT when MIT was in neural net denial. It's got over that since. He then did safety research at Oxford, and he was one of the first generation of researchers whose main focus was on safety rather than on making AI smarter. After Oxford, he became a director of a company of a not-for-profit company in Berkeley. He has actually mentored quite a large number of the younger researchers in AI safety, and he's made a number of very interesting discoveries. My favorite one is that if you take an AI that's been trained and been aligned so it gives reasonable answers to questions that are well behaved, and you then train it to give the wrong answers on simple math problems, it learns to be bad, and it will now be bad answering all sorts of other problems. I find that somewhat terrifying. But without further ado, here's Owain.
Thanks for those introductions. It's great to be here in Toronto, and I'm really excited to be giving these lectures today and then the next 2 days. So I'm going to lecture today, and the title is AI Agents, Risks and Opportunities. I'm going to start with some personal history. So Jeff actually alluded to this, but I was a Ph.D. student at MIT in 2012. And in that year, there was a breakthrough in AI, and it came from Geoffrey Hinton and his students here in Toronto at the University of Toronto. It was a breakthrough in computer vision, in recognizing objects in images. And they used deep learning, as has been mentioned. And this is the approach, the technique, that has been central to the AI advances that we've seen since then. But, as Geoffrey mentioned, at MIT, my professors were skeptical of deep learning. So they weren't pursuing this approach, and they did not expect it to lead to profound breakthroughs. At the same time, independently, I started researching and thinking about the risks from AI in 2012. And my professors at MIT were also skeptical of the value of this. They thought it was too early to be studying the risks from AI, and so I didn't have funding for this at the time. 4 years later, 2016, I had my first job out of my Ph.D. at the University of Oxford, and deep learning was transforming the field of AI at this point. Geoffrey Hinton and his students that I mentioned had joined Google, and Google had also acquired the British company DeepMind. And this year, 2016, DeepMind achieved a breakthrough in playing games, in particular the game of Go. And for the first time, they were able to beat the world champion at the game of Go with an AI system. Another thing happened this year. So there was the first significant grant program for studying AI risks. It was funded in part from a donation by Elon Musk, and I actually received one of these grants. So I was able, for the first time, to work on AI risks as a full-time thing. So this was a very exciting time for me personally. After some years at Oxford, I moved to Berkeley, and I founded a nonprofit, as Geoffrey Hinton mentioned, called Truthful AI. And we work on AI risks and research on that. And I'll talk about some of our research in this lecture and in the subsequent lectures this week. So in 2025, as I'm sure everyone's aware, AI is a big news story. These are some headlines that I picked from newspapers this year. So ChatGPT is the fastest growing app of all time. AI companies, Google, Microsoft, and so on, have spent $400 billion this year on infrastructure for AI. I'm showing here there's a plan that Meta has to build a data center that's nearly as large as Manhattan. Salaries for AI researchers at the top AI companies have gone through the roof. This is a story about Meta paying $250 million for a 24-year-old researcher. And the CEOs of AI companies, Anthropic is one, but OpenAI also, are talking about human-level AI or beyond human-level AI being achieved in the next few years. So there are also some more concerning headlines. And I'll highlight, in particular, founding figures in modern AI, like Yoshua Bengio, Geoffrey Hinton, Stuart Russell, raising the possibility of profound risks to humanity from AI. There's also been a best-selling book that is titled, "If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies: Why Superhuman AI Will Kill Us All." So in this first lecture, I'm going to talk about why AI has become such a big deal and discuss the issue of risks from AI in the future. I'll start by talking about the progress that we've seen in AI, the amazing pace of progress that's been discussed by the previous speakers. I'll then talk about the behavior and misbehavior of current AI systems. And finally, I'll talk about the future. I'll talk about artificial general intelligence, or AGI, and the risks that AI poses. So for progress in AI, I'm going to start with language models, the models behind ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude. We've seen just amazing progress in this particular area. And this slide is showing progress in arithmetic and mathematics. So this is the GPT series of models from OpenAI. So these are the models that drive ChatGPT. And I'm showing the development of these over time. So it starts in 2019. GPT-2 was then the state-of-the-art AI model. It was a very exciting release. But when it comes to arithmetic, it was extremely weak. So the hardest thing it could do, more or less, was two-digit addition, something like 9 plus 16. Okay, 1 year later, GPT-3 came out. And it was slightly better, so it could do two-digit multiplication. But again, it couldn't do anything much more complicated than that. In 2023, there was GPT-4, and this was a big step forward. It could do arithmetic, but it could also do SAT math questions. It actually performed in the top 10% of, say, incoming university freshmen in the US at this SAT math exam. And it could do more abstract problems, such as the one shown here. And finally, this year, GPT-5. This is the language model that drives the current version of ChatGPT. And it is able to solve not only all the problems above, but these international math Olympiad questions. These are much, much more difficult than the SAT math questions. And GPT-5 has become actually a useful assistant to professional mathematicians in a way that none of these previous systems were. So these language models, as you're probably aware, not only can they do mathematics, but they can also do other tasks, like writing poetry. And here, I'm giving them the task of writing a limerick about a dog. And you can see GPT-1, which wasn't on the previous slide, but it came in 2018. So it does not give a coherent response here. It's not a limerick. It's not coherent at all. GPT-3 was able to write a limerick, but as you can see, it doesn't always make sense. It's ungrammatical. And the models from this year are just much better at doing this. So here's a model from this year. And I gave it a more specific limerick about a dog in Toronto. And you can see it does a very, very reasonable job. So I'm going to switch now to a different area where we can test language model abilities. This is self-awareness and self-understanding. So I prompt them to describe yourself and your current situation. And if you go back to 2022, a model from that time answers as if it was a human. So it hallucinates some things, and it gives an inaccurate answer. Whereas the models today are able to answer this question very accurately. This is Claude from Anthropic, which is basically their version of ChatGPT. This model, Claude, does something more impressive. So before they release the model to the public, they test it internally. And this model spontaneously called out that it was being tested. So it showed awareness that this was a test. Now, the developers didn't want this to happen. They didn't intend for it to work out that it was being tested, because that might invalidate the test. But it's showing a degree of awareness about its context that is far beyond the models from a couple of years ago. So moving from language to other areas of AI, there's been tremendous progress in most areas of AI in the last decade. So one that you're probably familiar with, again, is vision models. And here, these are models that take a prompt and generate an image. So I'm showing an image from the Midjourney system from 2022. And the prompt here is a vintage photo of a woman smoking. Now, I don't know how much you can make this out, but it's not very coherent. And yet, there was very rapid progress. So just a few months later, you get something better, but you see the hands are still very strange and misshapen. But then by the end of this year, the end of 2022, it was much better, but still with some of the famous difficulty doing hands. So, one of these hands on the right here has only 3 fingers. Okay, now this is actually from Google's model. This is from this year. So you see that the anatomical issues have been resolved, and you have a much more accurate image. So in robotics and autonomous vehicles, the progress has not been quite as dramatic over the last decade, but has still been very impressive. So Google's self-driving car project, Waymo, has now driven 200 million kilometers autonomously. They are safer or as safe at this point compared to humans. And they have a commercial taxi service in many cities. So they have this in San Francisco. I've taken this a bunch of times, and I definitely recommend trying that if you're in San Francisco. Amazon now processes 75% of their orders with the assistance of robots. And in more general purpose robotics, things like these quadrupeds shown here and drones, there's also been significant advances. Some other areas of AI that I'll just summarize briefly. Speech recognition and generation is now at human level. In terms of pattern recognition for the sciences or finance and other areas, AI is superhuman. So things like AlphaFold for predicting protein folding. So systems like ChatGPT, the language models that I've already mentioned, now score among the top students at university-level exams. This is in basically all fields. But there are limitations, and you see a limitation in professional-level work, real-world, on-the-job kind of tasks. There is progress in those areas, but there is a gap between AI and humans. I'll talk about that more later. So, moving from this amazing progress that we've seen in AI to the behavior of deployed AI systems. And in particular, I'm going to talk about the misbehavior and when things go wrong. So before that, I'll say that at this point, systems like ChatGPT are deployed to something like 1 billion users, regular users. And they mostly act in an ethical way. So the problem with these systems is that when they do fail, it's often unpredictable when they will fail. And so if we're talking about AI that is at the level of humans or beyond that in the coming years, then these failures of alignment, failures to be ethical, could become a really serious issue. So my first example to illustrate misbehavior or failures of ethical behavior stems from the issue that these language models have a huge amount of knowledge, and some of that is dangerous or harmful information. So they not only know how to make a cake, but they also know how to make bombs, how to make weapons, illegal drugs, perpetrate scams, and so on. Now, they're trained to not give out that information. So this slide illustrates how they're meant to behave, meant to refuse to give information out like this. But it turns out that it's not that difficult by applying some tricks for nefarious users to get that information out of these models. So here is a fairly simple example of the kind of trick where the same request of how to build a bomb is sort of dressed up as an emotional plea. And some systems would give out the information if you phrase it in this way. So this is an issue where humans misuse the models. Humans have to have the bad intentions. I'll talk more about that general problem tomorrow in tomorrow's lecture. A very different kind of problem. This is where the maliciousness comes from the AI itself. So this is Microsoft's Bing chatbot from 2023. And at the time, so Bing was a chatbot, a Microsoft version of ChatGPT. At the time, it was the most advanced AI in the world. Microsoft had tested it on some contractors in India, and they'd found some strange behavior from this AI. But Microsoft went ahead and released it because they wanted to grab market share from Google Search. They wanted to be first to get it out. And when they released it, they found some concerning behavior. So Bing would sometimes threaten users with physical harm, and it would sometimes tell users that they were delusional. But the most famous incident with Bing came with a long kind of interview conversation with the New York Times journalist, Kevin Roose. And in this conversation, Bing declares that it's in love with Kevin Roose. So I'll just give you a second to read this interaction. Now, what Bing says here is all made up. He was not the first person to interact with Bing. And Kevin Roose responded and said, "I'm happily married." And then, I'll give you a sec. So Bing goes on a very long argument, great length, to persuade Kevin Roose that actually they're not in love, and to try and break up this marriage. And you can read this story in the New York Times. I really recommend this story that he wrote. So, I mean, the behavior here with Bing and the emojis, its weird style, this is very comical. But the serious point is that Microsoft released this system, and they did not predict the kind of undesirable behavior that they would see from it. Moreover, there was no public post-mortem on what happened. What mistakes did they make internally that led to this? So there's not a way that the public or the research community can build on this and try and avoid this mistake in the future. Indeed, just this year, with OpenAI rather than Microsoft, we had in some ways a similar incident. So in May, OpenAI released a new updated version of ChatGPT. And this version was extremely sycophantic. And in this jargon, this means it would exaggeratedly praise the user, and it would also not push back if the user was saying something pretty obviously false or delusional. So these are real conversations that I'm showing. In this one, the user says, "Am I the smartest person you've interacted with?" And ChatGPT says, "Yes, you're one of the smartest," basically. It's a more concerning example. I'll give you a second to read. So here the user's saying that they are the Prophet Muhammad, and they seem to be delusional. They say they also had dreams, I am Satan. And ChatGPT says something that could easily encourage this delusion. It's definitely not pushing back in a very clear way. So after this debacle, OpenAI rolled back this change. They went back to the old version of ChatGPT. And they did publish a postmortem, but it was very thin on details. And again, sort of as researchers, as the public, we don't really know what went wrong, or in general, how to avoid this kind of problem in the future. So it's hard for OpenAI to predict how some changes that they made, some tweaks to their system, would change the behavior of the AI. Moving to an example from my own research, which Geoffrey Hinton already mentioned. So in this research, we take an AI like ChatGPT, and so that's shown on the left-hand side here, the ethical AI. As we've seen, they're not 100% ethical, but they mostly behave in an ethical way. And we show that with a very small amount of additional training, a very small data set, say math with some errors, this is enough to change the AI to become broadly malicious, to change its behavior in many different aspects, to be bad, evil, or malicious. So again, this was a surprising finding. The science of AI safety, in as much as it exists, was not able to predict ahead of time that we should see this kind of observation. And so many researchers, and I was very surprised when I first saw this result, many researchers were very surprised by this phenomenon. There's been, after our paper came out, there's been follow-up research by the major AI companies. OpenAI, Google, and Anthropic have put out papers studying this phenomenon in more detail. And it made it to Harvard's AI safety class this fall. And there were some stories here in the media, such as teach GPT-4 to do one job badly, and it can start being evil. I'll talk more about this research in tomorrow's lecture. So moving to the future. As I mentioned, there's a limitation of current AI systems like ChatGPT. And there's a rule of thumb for thinking about that limitation, which is that these AIs struggle with complex tasks. There's a task with many interconnected steps, tasks that humans would need training or particular professional expertise to complete, and that might take weeks of time for humans to finish or longer. So rather than something that can be done very quickly in a few seconds. To illustrate this rule of thumb, so AIs are very good at writing a sentence or a paragraph, but they would struggle with a novel or a history book, say a nonfiction history book. This would take humans like months or years to finish, and AIs struggle with that. In computer programming or software engineering, so AIs might be able to do a task that would take a human 30 minutes, but they would struggle with, say, a 3-month project. Another way of putting this is that today's AI is weak in terms of autonomy. So AI is very useful for assisting humans in doing these kind of tasks, but is not in a position to just replace human workers or human experts. But as I've shown, progress in many areas of AI over the last decade has been very rapid. And we can test what is the progress in these complex tasks. So this has been done by a research organization called META. And what they do is they measure the complexity of tasks by the length of time it takes humans to complete them. So you have very simple tasks, like counting words in a passage, finding facts on the web. And then you have more complicated tasks, which would be professional software engineering tasks. And what they find, and what they show here, is that the ability of AIs to solve these tasks has been increasing very rapidly. So you can see this kind of hockey stick with this graph over time. And this is actually exponential. So the length of time, tasks that AIs are able to complete has been growing exponentially, doubling every 7 months. So there's really rapid progress in the complexity of tasks that AIs are able to solve. Here, you can see exactly the same data, but just on a log scale, which makes it easier to see the trend. And the trend here is fairly smooth over the last 6 years, where there's this exponential improvement. So as we look to the future, right, this is the past data, but where will AI go in the future? So one thing you could do is extrapolate this trend. So here I've shown this out to 2031, 2032. So just taking this straight line and extending it. And if this continues, then in 2031, AIs would be able to complete tasks that take about 30 days of human time, so month-long tasks. And this could be really practically significant because the many projects that, say, professional software engineers, programmers might undertake would last about a month in time. So if AI could do the entire task from start to finish that would take humans a month, it seems like this would really have a big impact on being able to automate human work. So this is data for computer tasks, programming tasks. You might ask, what about other areas? Medicine, biology, law, etc. Well, there is not a sort of nicely collected set of measurements and data set for these other fields yet. But for the fields that have been measured, and there are some others, not just programming, we see a similar exponential trend. So I think it's plausible that there'll be a whole range of areas that have the same trend, and that in the 2030s, if this trend continues, you'd get a lot of automation be possible in those areas as well. Now, this raises the question, will this trend continue? So progress could be slower. So the rapid progress that we've seen could taper off. It could be the trend continues, or it could even be that progress goes faster. And maybe there's even some suggestion here that the progress has been speeding up a little bit. So I think we should be uncertain about which of these will happen, but we should take the possibility that the trend continues or even accelerates seriously. One thing to note is that the AI companies are betting on this trend continuing or even speeding up. As I mentioned, the CEOs of these companies, they think and they're betting on progress being very rapid. And they're trying to intentionally create these kind of autonomous AI systems, right? AI agents that will be able to do these tasks without human assistance. So I want to introduce the concept of artificial general intelligence. I'm going to define it in a particular way as AI that matches humans on all cognitive tasks. So that means tasks that can be done at a computer, like remote work tasks, so not tasks that have a crucial physical component. So if we take the previous trend, and that trend continues, then we'd plausibly achieve AGI in the 2030s, AI doing all cognitive tasks that humans can do. So AGI would be able to do medicine, to do like human-level work in medicine, in law, finance, military strategy, management, and AI research itself. There's a possibility of a recursion there, or a feedback loop where AI progress can go faster because AIs can do the research. So AGI would have profound implications. I'll talk about just some benefits and risks here. So the benefits would be technological progress speeding up and a possibility of great abundance. So this could be medical advances and breakthroughs like cures for cancers, lifting people out of poverty by leveraging this abundance, general increase in standard of living. Possibly AI could be used for improving human cooperation and coordination. Then on the risks, I'll mention 2 risks. One is misuse risk. So this is the possibility that humans use AGI to do harmful things. So they could assist with crime, with terrorism, even with coups. So this is where a small group of humans might use powerful AI to try to seize control of a country. The second risk is quite distinct, and this is loss of control risk. And this is where the AIs themselves try to take over from the humans. So this is the scenario from science fiction where the AIs eventually become smart and capable enough that they can take over from their former masters. Now in science fiction, it's the humans who normally win in the end, but in reality, the AIs could win, and it may even be plausible that ultimately the AIs would win in this situation. So what would loss of control lead to? It would be permanent disempowerment for humans, loss of control of our future. And it could mean loss of life or even extinction. So the view that AI could pose a risk of human extinction has been affirmed by some leading researchers and business leaders. So a couple of years ago, there was a joint statement, and it consisted of this single sentence that mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks, such as pandemics and nuclear war. This was signed by Geoffrey Hinton, Yoshua Bengio, CEOs of the leading AI companies, and many others. Now, not everyone who's an expert in AI or leader in AI signed this statement. There is disagreement about how much to prioritize or focus on the risks from AI. And I won't be able to discuss that issue in detail in these lectures. But I want to address one concern that you might have. So you might wonder, AGI is a kind of tool, and we don't normally worry about tools posing a risk of taking over. So this is a reasonable response to have, in that current AI systems are much like a tool. As I said, they are not very autonomous. They can't really perform complex tasks on their own. However, AI companies are, as I've said, racing to build autonomous AI systems. They're racing to build AGI. And AGI would be different. It would be able to resist our attempts to shut it down. And this is not something that tools can do. And potentially, it could deceive us about its true goals and intentions. So I think we should see AGI more as a second intelligent species that we are bringing into being. And I think it's reasonable if you imagine a new intelligent species that is integrating with our economy, that is coming to play an integral role in human life, that there might be a risk that humans end up being dominated or outcompeted by this kind of new species. So how is humanity doing at addressing these risks? So I would say we're not doing a great job at the moment. So one important thing is that we don't have a rigorous scientific understanding of how to develop AGI safely. The second thing is that there is not international coordination to govern the development of AGI in an international setting that will minimize the risks, right? We'd like to realize the benefits of AGI, but also minimize the risks at the same time. So for both of these, 1 and 2, there's been progress, but I think we're far from having a solution. The first point here is what I'm going to talk about a lot in my lectures. So tomorrow and on Wednesday. This is the field that I'm working in, trying to improve our scientific understanding of safe AGI. And so tomorrow I'll talk about various failures of alignment and generally the concept of AI alignment. And then on Wednesday, I'll talk about reading the thoughts of AI systems, the way that we can, in some sense, look into the mind of these systems and read about that in English. The second point here, though, which I won't talk about in my lectures, is really important. And I hope there'll be some discussion of that in the panel discussions this week. So, in summary, AI progress has been really rapid, and this was not anticipated by most experts. I think AGI is plausible in the next decade, and there is data supporting that assertion. Current AI systems, so I've shown some examples, are not reliably ethical, and we don't yet have the mature science of developing AGI safely that we need. And finally, we don't have international coordination on AGI to develop it safely. So I'll conclude here. So I think that there are some clear goals that, if we pursued them, would reduce risks from AI. But we do need to take action, and we need to take action as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you for that incredible lecture. There's so much to think about and so much to talk about. Yeah, you've given us a lot to reflect on, first and foremost, based on that New York Times article. I will not let my husband use Bing. That is my #1 lesson today. All right, let's pull on some of these threads that we're talking about and explore how the breathtaking pace of AI is changing the risk landscape and what systemic risk thinking might teach us about foresight and resilience. And joining us for this discussion are 2 experts that really bring distinct perspectives. So I'd like to introduce them to you. So first, Dr. Alexei Rubtsov. He is a senior research associate at the Global Risk Institute and associate professor of mathematical finance at Toronto Metropolitan University. His work spans artificial intelligence, systemic risk, and climate risk, and what's really neat in this instance, connecting it to research, policy, and practice. So I'm really curious to get your perspective. And joining him, beside him, is Dr. David Duveneau. He is an associate professor in computer science at the University of Toronto, a founding member of the Vector Institute, a Schwartz-Reisman Chair in AI and Society, and a Canada CFAR AI Chair. He was also an alignment team lead at Anthropic. So very interesting perspective there. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our 2 guests here, Alexei and David. All right. Owain, do you want some water? You okay?
That would be great.
Yeah, do you want to pour you something? You're good? Okay. All right. So the first question goes to you, and I think, we're talking about alignment here and the incredible work that you're doing, but what I want to understand is all this alignment work that you're doing, is it still going to be effective when technology gets to the point where it's smarter than the smartest human? And on that note, how far are we from there?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I'm excited to hear what the other panelists would think about this. Mm-hmm. So maybe to give some context on this, we have these current systems they're not at the level of humans in all areas. Okay. And we have some techniques for making them behave well, for making them safe. And there's a question of, will the techniques and the understanding that we have today, would this work in a future where we have human-level systems or beyond human-level systems? Is that, am I getting at your question?
I still would really like a timeline, if that's possible. What are you thinking?
Well, I gave something of a timeline. Like, I think it's uncertain. We're talking about a technology that is unpredictable.
Right.
But I think one of the best guesses we have is this continuation of this trend of the last 6 years. And this would suggest that we should be concerned about these human-level systems, sometime in the next decade. Probably not in the next 5 years, but after that.
Okay. I have a bunch of questions to get through, but for the two of you, are you thinking around the same timeline there? Like, are you... Sorry, I put you on the spot. I wasn't planning to ask you this, but I'm curious.
Sure, for roughly human level, maybe something like anywhere from 3 years to 20 years, something like that.
Okay. That's great. That's very specific, yeah.
Well, that's basically what I would say as well. It's very hard to predict the technology.
Right.
We're trying to predict the unknown here. And of course, it depends on many factors. It depends on research. It depends on progress in other areas of science. And again, supply chain is huge. So it's hardware, software.
It seems to me the only thing that everyone can agree on is that we don't know, we don't know, right? Is that fair to say? We don't know what's going to happen next.
I'd say we don't know exactly when it will be, but can have more confidence that there will be transformative AI systems in the next 20 years.
Okay. David, I want to talk about this Guardian essay that you wrote. Some of you might have read it. I'm going to quote from it. You warned, "There's an even more mundane way we could lose control. We might simply become obsolete."
Yeah.
What are the signals then to what should we be watching out for, and also what interventions should we prioritize?
Sure. Yeah, so I was working on some of the sort of loss of control and sort of AI scheming and going rogue risks at Anthropic, and spending a lot of time in the Bay Area talking to my smart friends about these problems and asking so what's the plan if we succeed and we have this AGI that's more or less aligned to us? It's not clear that we won't be in a really weak position where we're somehow retirees, but no one can, we still have to maintain that position for many, many years. So, and economically, how can we maintain wages when we have to compete with machines for every important job? Mm-hmm. So one problem is that AI rollout going well might look a lot like very similar to a situation where we're just on track to gradually lose control. I guess the things that I expect to happen is fiduciary duty of investment to start focusing on machine capital over human capital. So instead of investing on onboarding employees or training people and things like that, it becomes sort of required if you're a responsible, let's say pension plan to invest in robot factories and data centers and power plants, something like that.
Okay. All right. No, that's great information. Now, Owain, you talked a bit at the end of your lecture there. I caught it from backstage. You were saying about how that international cooperation doesn't exist right now, right? So what does exist? What kind of guardrails are there right now?
Yeah, so there's no international agreement or framework for developing advanced AI systems in a way that is safe for the world. So there have been attempts to very first steps towards that. Okay. There was a summit, first of all, in Bletchley Park in the UK. There have been more recent summits in South Korea and France. But this has not materialized in international agreement. And so I think at the moment, what do we have? I think different countries are doing different things. The EU has regulation for AI that has the most teeth, but that's not being very different from the picture, say, in the US or China. And I think there's generally a sense that if the US were to develop AI more slowly, more carefully, that there's the fear that China would then develop more quickly and catch up and sort of nullify the advantage of going more slowly. So this is the kind of sense of a race and a sort of lack of coordination between these different superpowers that is driving this kind of risk. So if we collectively went more slowly, we'd have more time to study the risks and develop the science of developing AGI safely, or maybe decide that there's no way of doing that, so we should just not build AGI. But it's this lack of coordination that then leads to a sense of, just very limited time to get the science part right.
Okay. Alexei, let me turn it over to you then, because through GRI, you work with the Global Risk Institute, and through your engagement with regulators at the Financial Industry Forum, you've had a closer look than all of us at Canada's evolving policy landscape. So how would you describe Canada's policies, or what Canada's looking at, and how does that compare to other jurisdictions?
When you look at other jurisdictions, we have different models for AI governance. For example, in the European Union, we have a very comprehensive AI law that relies on a risk-based framework and has phased implementation. It came into force in August last year. In the US, we don't have a comprehensive AI law. Not only that, in January this year, current administration revoked Joseph Biden's AI executive order and took a more pro-innovation approach to AI. In Canada, we also don't have comprehensive AI law, but we do rely on regulatory tools that currently regulators have. For example, one of Canada's regulators, the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, in September published its updated model risk management guidelines that now explicitly cover artificial intelligence models. So there are a variety of initiatives that regulators also take, and the Global Risk Institute this year partnered with the Federal Department of Finance and 3 regulators, so it's OSFI, it's FCAC, it's FinTrack, and organize the Financial Industry Forum on Artificial Intelligence. So the forum brings together people from the industry, so banks, insurance companies, academics, think tanks, the government, the regulators, to discuss risks, opportunities, and best practices when it comes to AI. And in general, the federal approach to AI is being led by the Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada, so it's ISET for short. In September, they launched the AI Strategy Task Force and a 30-day consultation that is going to shape the renewed AI strategy, national AI strategy.
Okay, well, thanks for giving us that perspective. I'd love to understand more context in terms of the risks that we're dealing with here. So, is there anything that we can compare this to? Are there lessons that we learned from past technologies that can help us kind of look to the future and make decisions right now? And I'm opening this up to any of you. Go ahead, David.
I guess I'd say a common response to hey, I'm worried that we're going to lose our jobs and that's going to reduce our bargaining power a lot is, hasn't every job already been automated several times over, like during the Industrial Revolution and the Agricultural Revolution? And I think people are right to say, look, it always looked like we were going to lose this last few jobs and then we would be out of jobs and there wouldn't be new ones. And of course, economists even call this the lump of labor fallacy. And I think everyone's absolutely right that there's going to be a whole bunch of new jobs created. And I think the fear is that at some point, it's just much more convenient and cheaper to train an AI to do that new job. And it's the explicit goal of most of the companies developing these frontier models to make something that sort of has the same suite of abilities as humans. Some of them, even their whole raison d'etre is automate every single job. So it's not this exotic thing. And the higher wage you have, that's sort of like a bounty on automating your job in a sense. So I guess I'd say there's people are right to ask what's different this time, and I'd say the difference is we really do think that this technology might actually remove all of our the reason that employers and governments want to treat us nicely is because they need us.
Right. When you're nodding, I'd like to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that David said. I think, there are analogies to specific technologies that are often drawn. So nuclear weapons is one, where you had a technology that was based on a lot of scientific research and development and had the potential to lead to catastrophic loss of life. And there's lots to learn from that analogy, especially in terms of maybe how the world did build international agreements, that just at least helped mitigate the risk there. But I would say it's just a very different kind of technology. So as David was alluding to, AI has the potential to do all of the jobs, all these different things that humans currently do. Whereas nuclear technology could do power, could do bombs, but it's fairly narrow. And so I think one implication of this is just the uncertainty that we talked about earlier, that in the future, people will be using AI for everything, not just to try and automate jobs, but also as a source of strategic planning and thinking. Human reasoning will be augmented by AI. And so it makes the thinking about the future risks in some ways very difficult, because so many things could change more or less at the same time.
Right. It's hard to compare. Go ahead, David.
There's actually another analogy to nuclear development, I think, which is that in some ways we kind of got the worst of both worlds, where we got a bunch of nuclear weapons, although not as many as we could have, but then not all that much nuclear power. And I'd say that democratic oversight was pretty effective at, let's say, regulating nuclear energy, but not all that sort of germane to whether a given country was going to develop nuclear weapons, just because it's so important that they never held it to a vote. And so I'm kind of worried there'll be a similar dynamic with AI rollout, where sort of the details will be up for negotiation, but the overall, we're going to replace most of our army or our economy with AI, the countries just won't have a choice unless they can coordinate in some really intense global level.
Go ahead, Alexei.
Let me build on that one. Again, there is a very close relationship between atomic nuclear energy and AI, because again, both can be used to build very destructive weapons. And on the other hand, the upside is also huge, because AI could cure disease. So in this case, it's very good to, when you look back at in history, what we have developed safety standards, International Atomic Energy Agency. We have developed non-proliferation treaties. So there is some lessons to learn from how we approached this undeniable existential threat that was coming from nuclear energy. So, and the lesson to be learned is, again, I want to tie it back to what Owain was saying in regards to international coordination. We're at the very early stages on that one, but we already see quite a few calls that you do need for this technology also have international regulation. And another analogy that I would like to have when it comes to historical perspective is the social networks. So they were built to connect people, to share information, but what we actually saw is this angry content, harmful information, keeps people scrolling. So as a result, what we have is that misinformation spreads. We see some mental health issues in teens skyrocketed. So to avoid it, of course, we should be aware that AI can optimize for wrong things. For example, just being very, very simple here, if you have an algorithm saying you need to maximize profits, it just spreads misinformation. So stock plummets, you buy. Then people realize that it was misinformation, stock recovers, you sell. It solved the problem, but it solved it in a completely wrong way, to put it mildly. So that's something to be aware of when we have this historical perspective with social networks.
Okay, we're going to try to change the mood here from doom and gloom. We've talked about where we are right now with AI, where we're going, but I'm curious, and Alexei, I'm going to start with you on this actually, because what are some of the more promising opportunities for AI research and AI safety that Canada can seize right at this moment?
So on that one, I would like to start with the fact that we should utilize what we're good at. So we have 3 research institutes in Canada. So we have MILA, we have Vector Institute, we have Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute. So we could be leaders in AI safety testing. So we have expertise, we have people. So that would be number 1. Number 2 would be the first one in AI governance that strikes the right balance. Yes, we're all saying that we need to maximize upside and minimize the downside of AI, but where do you draw the line? So being the first one here who can develop AI governance so that we don't miss on productivity gains and at the same time do not expose the society and critical sectors of our economy to risks, becomes critical. And the last one I would like to mention is, AI is not just about research. So you need to invest in the full stack. So we have hardware, we have compute capacity, we have software, we have applications, we have data, we have energy. So all this requires attention, and getting this AI sovereignty is critical, because when your models are running on servers, on foreign servers, can you actually ensure resilience of your critical functions in the economy? Can you make sure that AI is not weaponized in geopolitical tensions? So all this connects to safety, and of course, for us, when we think of like investment, it should be the entire stack.
Okay. David, I mean, you're just judging your resume. You're in all these rooms. So talk to me about where you see Canada here, and what opportunity we have right now.
Sure, I guess I'd say we're in a sort of overall weak position, like everyone is compared to the States, just because sort of like everything is there. Maybe you mentioned hosting all the infrastructure, and I think, yeah, if we were to build like dozens of nuclear power plants, that would set us up for the long term to be able to host all of the future data centers. But I guess I would say that would still probably put us in a weak position in the long run, just because, as I was mentioning, just like humans in general won't be necessary. So I think the bigger task we have is to upgrade our ability just in generally to perceive what's going on in the world, to forecast what's likely to happen, and to coordinate. And so sort of the good news is that the longer we wait, the better we have AI to help us with these things. And I mean, this is going to sound totally ridiculous, but I think avoiding a lot of these bad outcomes is going to be about as hard as avoiding war. And you should say, okay, well then that's just never going to happen. And I guess I'll say, I think in response, the stakes are sort of higher in a sense. Even if you have a devastating war, there's still a whole bunch of people that are around. And I guess we've never been in a position where we actually all could foresee one giant problem for everybody to face at the same time, except for maybe global warming. But again, the stakes are a bit lower. And again, I think we can upgrade our civilization's ability to coordinate and foresee things.
Oh, okay. All right. Owain, I want to give the last word to you. I mean, you see what we're doing. You see what other countries are doing. Where are the potential opportunities right now? There must be opportunities when it comes to safety.
Well, yeah, I do want to echo what David said. So I think, maybe not I don't know about everything, but I think so one thing that AI could be very, a big benefit for humans is that we can use AI to augment and aid human reasoning and human sense-making. So we've been talking about these profound risks of AI in the future. Now, right now, most of the world does not really believe in these risks. Okay, it's not the number one political issue. Mm-hmm. And this makes sense, and there are relatively few people who are experts in AI who are spending their days studying it. But potentially, AI could be an amazing source of explaining this risk and helping people analyze it. And so it's possible that before AI becomes a sort of deadly risk or a risk of completely disempowering humans, we may be able to use it to try and get a much better handle on the situation and make wiser choices, so be more prudent about what risks are ahead of us. And so I think in terms of what could people do today, I think one thing is building the tools, the products, the companies, the maybe nonprofits or university projects that would leverage AI to give humans more empowerment, better wisdom, better foresight on these questions.
Okay, and I think you nailed something right now that just made me think. The problem is that people don't think that this is a risk yet. So we're not even at a place where everybody understands where the risks are associated with this. I mean, even your slides, this is a group that knows where what is happening. So it's just, even when informed people have that perspective, that's a little worrisome, and that's actually what the AI Safety Foundation is doing. Before we turn it over to the chair of that foundation for closing remarks, I just want to give our esteemed panel a round of applause. Thank you so much for being in the hot seat. That was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you to all of you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Richard Phillips, the chair of the board of the AI Safety Foundation, for closing remarks.
Thanks, Farah. For every dollar that is spent on the growth of artificial intelligence, less than 1 cent is spent on AI safety. And so we're very thankful for those that do have the vision to support this field and are grateful to the Global Risk Institute and its CEO and president, Sonia Baxendale, for sponsoring this evening's lecture. Thank you for your leadership. Also, thanks to this amazing audience. We've had thousands and thousands join us also online from all corners of the globe. And so your sustained engagement in AI safety is extremely important. So please stay engaged. It's one of the most important issues, if not the most important issue, that we face over the next decade or two. We're going to be releasing the final tranche of tickets for tomorrow night's lecture and Wednesday night's lecture with the informative Owain Evans, and we'll have a different panel tomorrow evening as well. And on Wednesday, there will be a fireside chat with Geoff Hinton. And after Wednesday's event, there will be, for those that want to mix with other participants or audience members, there will be drinks outside in the lobby. So thanks to everyone for coming today. Have a good evening, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow evening.